Are you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready. Yeah,
Oh,
I'm waiting
okay.
for you.
Sorry. You look like you're doing something.
No, I'm fine.
I'm Austin Lugo.
I'm Andrew Harp.
This is With Nothing to Say.
Let's talk about Nothing But a Man.
Before we get into this week's film, next week we're going to be watching The Parallax View. For my birthday, which was just a couple of weeks ago, I got this really nice collection of Blu-rays that are all 1970s films. I don't know if The Parallax View is on it, but it has made me want to watch a 70s film. I feel like we haven't done. Well, this film came out in the 60s, right? I was trying to
Yeah,
think
this
like
is
the
this
last
is
70s
64
film
film.
we did. I feel like it's
We
been,
probably
but
I don't know.
I feel like 70s is an era we've done a lot of, though. Like, if we think, we look,
It's a beautiful era. It's a
it's
beautiful
a great
decade of
era of
American film.
cinema.
Yeah, especially like American film. Like the best actors, the best directors. I mean, it's just it's always good.
I'm excited. I'm very excited to watch this. But this week we watched Nothing But a Man, which it's been probably 2.5 or 3 weeks since I've seen it because we kept moving back
Yeah.
when the podcast would be. So I may be a little rough on some of the moments in this film, but I think that will help at least me talk about things that really stuck out. Because usually when, of course, we come on the podcast, I'm usually watching it the night before because I'm doing it at the last minute. So this is the first one, at least in a while, that I've had this much time to mull over it and think about it. And I've actually done, I would argue, a lot of reading that's related to it, not on purpose. I'm taking a course at the university, and there just happens to be a lot of stuff about this particular moment in time and sort of the problems and the issues and all of that. But I think where I really want to start with this piece is just sort of the rawness of it, right? I mean, there's something very low budget handheld camera just trying to get the shots, right? It's not clean cut. It's not something that's very smooth. It's just like people out there just trying to get it, right? They're just trying to get the footage. And I think that doesn't necessarily add to the piece. Sometimes it's just how it goes, right? Sometimes this is just we don't have any money to make this piece, and so we kind of have to work with what we have. But I think in this film, it really leans into that. And I've talked about before that I think one of the things that a lot of modern films really struggle with is showing poverty and what poverty actually looks like, right? I think we have this illusion of what we think it means to not have money or to be in poverty, or to struggle or to suffer financially. But we rarely ever actually see that on the screen and see it done well. And I think this film really captures it from its first moments.
I like the opening scene, right? Like you said, because it's like it kind of like work and working is like a very big part of the movie. And so you see right away, Duff, the main character, working, right? He's working on the railroad. And yeah, I do like that decision to just immediately begin the movie of like men working,
Mm-hmm.
Duff working, because that's just a thing that comes out so much in the movie. Like, work, jobs, making money, supporting a family, what have you. Like that is like a theme and a subject that comes up like again and again in the movie. So I appreciate that. Like, yeah, like the first thing that you see is like him working, everybody working together, and yeah, and so like that's like kind of like the like heart of the film is that like Duff, he's like working on the railroad with his buddies,
Yeah.
and one of them played by Yaphet Kotto, by the way, which is great. I like seeing him in the movie. Very young Yaphet Kotto. He died
Yeah.
a long time ago. I love him. He's such a good actor. He looks amazing. He's like an alien and stuff, as you know. And uh, Duff Anderson is played by Ivan Dixon, and who's really good.
He's
He's a
incredible.
great actor, a very strong actor,
Yeah.
and they're like doing like this like railroad outside of like Birmingham, Alabama, and they go into town, and that kind of like spurs like the rest of the movie in terms of him meeting his in terms of meeting a woman there, um Josie, and they begin this relationship, and that's sort of like the heart of the movie too. And so like, yeah, work, this relationship. You said that like the movie is like, I was reminded of like Cassavetes, like in terms of the filmmaking.
Yeah.
Like, I don't find his movies like particular. Like, yeah, like his movies are low budget, and this movie is like relatively low budget. But I think they're made like perfectly. Like, I mean, like there is like kind of like a handheld lo-fi kind of like aspect to it.
Yeah.
But I like that. It's kind of like this sort of like realistic thing, right? In which like, and Cassavetes does the same thing, and I fucking love Cassavetes. So obviously, like this movie, I liked a lot. Obviously, where you get amazing kind of like close-ups of people. Close-ups of people in this movie are great. They look awesome. When you get a close-up of someone, they look really great. Like, I don't know what it is. It's just like the texture. It could be a combination of like lighting, the grain of the film, the way that they look, the way that they're put together. I don't know. Like when you see like a close-up of someone, like it's amazing. So yeah, no, I love the filmmaking. I don't know if there's anything I would change about it in particular.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting that I recently read Richard Wright's Black Boy, and then very soon after that, for class, I had to read a book called Heavy. And Heavy, in a lot of ways, is a response to Richard Wright's Black Boy. And so Richard Wright's Black Boy is sort of autobiographical about Richard Wright growing up as a poor black boy in the South in the early 1900s. And Heavy is basically just a more modern version of it. It's growing up in the 80s and early 90s. And sort of that same experience. I think they both grew up in Alabama. And of course, this film also starts in Alabama. And one of the things that I find interesting about all three of these pieces, referring to the film too, is that so much of their life is told through work, because work so much shapes their life, right? They don't have, like, I think it's a privilege, and I've said this before, it is a privilege to say that money doesn't matter. And the fact is that when it matters, it really matters, and the work that you have really matters. And one of the films that I thought of while watching this movie was, and I can't remember the name of it, but I'm sure you will, that film that we watched about the like 1920 labor rights, West Virginia coal mine.
Mattawan.
That's the movie. That was the very first thing that came to my mind, because there is sort of discussions of unionization, right? There's that moment where he's working at the ironworks or in that sort of metal
it's
thing.
It's like a sawmill, right?
Sawmill, yeah.
It's like something a mill of some sort. Yeah, in there, yeah.
And but he's trying to unionize.
That scene is so frustrating though, because he wasn't actually trying to unionize. He was just like, he was talking about like I guess that's how like evil like management people like at the time were. I mean, they still are, but like that's how evil that's how evil they were back in the day. That like even like it's probably not too far off, right? In terms of like Duff wasn't like talking, he was just talking about them as black men, like to kind of like not be bullied around by the white people there. And so yeah, we need to get together kind of thing, like just very general thing. And even that like creates an immediate antagonization from the management, because they don't want a union, because of course it threatens their bottom line. Right. So that's a great scene, and he just like quits, because that's of course kind of like the part of the film, is that like Duff happens to be a proud man, like he's a proud person, and he is not really interested in like bending the knee to anyone, right? Like especially white people who want him to. And it's kind of interesting, there's not actually any moments in this, there are actually no explosions. There's explosions in which like there are moments where Duff like he like pushes his wife that one time, like he gets like kind of like physical with her. I think there's that scene where like he breaks a chair, but it's kind of funny because it's not a movie, and it's kind of interesting that it doesn't go this way, because I think if you made this movie today, they would insist on this. There are no like moments of like explosive violence in which like white people find Duff and they beat him up, or they like destroy him or break his legs or something like that. They threaten him and they try to intimidate him, and they make verbal threats and things like that, But it's kind of interesting, you know. It's just kind of like there's something kind of interesting about that decision, just sort of like not include um those like scenes you, I don't know, I guess like the typical American viewer would expect in a movie about, you know,
Yeah.
not entirely about, but partly about like racial relations in the United States in the 1960s. Because obviously people were like really, you know, I think maybe in Alabama, you know, it's just kind of one of those things where it's like, I don't know, it's interesting that it doesn't go that far.
Yeah. Well, I think it is a very purposeful choice not to do that. And I celebrate that choice because there
Yeah,
is a certain
I'm good.
sense of catharsis in that violence, right? Not only in the violence itself, but then in the repercussions of that violence and the reaction to that violence. And what Richard Wright talks about and Casey Lehman talks about in Heavy, and what's being discussed here too, is the real terror isn't the violence itself. It's not the getting hurt. It is the constant notion that it could happen at any moment, right? That is where the power lies. The power doesn't lie in the violence. The power lies in the threat of the violence, that the violence could happen. And that is what makes this film so incredibly tense, is that at any given moment, right, that violence could happen, but you're not given that cathartic thing of, because right, once the violence happens, you're like, oh, right, it's happened, it's done. But you don't get that, right? You don't get to leave that space, and that is the space that you know, our character lives with every single day, right? That's the real like struggle of this piece. It isn't the violence itself, it is the threat of the violence, right? And you talk about this idea like not willing to bend a knee, right? Not willing to kind of give the big smile. And that is something that that Richard
yeah, they
Wright,
call him boy. They call him boy all the time. Like every White Cup character calls him a boy. Like, yeah,
right, and that's something that Richard Wright talks a lot about in Black Boy 2, is the same thing that he struggled with, is like he refused, right? Because he was surrounded, because throughout the book, right, he's surrounded by people at the beginning, you know, through the first half of the book, it's in Alabama, and then he moves up to Chicago. And even when he's up in Chicago, right, because he thinks this is sort of an escape from the South and sort of the hatred. And to a certain extent it is, but of course racism didn't cease to
they
exist.
talk about that in the movie where they talk about like, oh, maybe we should go north or something like that. It's like it's not that much better than here.
It's not that much better.
I think yeah, like Duff says, like you might as well just like, you know, make a difference here, you know, make a living here, you know, instead of just like traveling up north.
Yeah, it's
everywhere you go, it's fucked up. Like,
I mean, it's fucked up no matter what you do, and
yeah,
it's, you know, there's like this sense that, well, you know, if you just do what you're told, right? If you just sort of bend your knee, you can live a perfectly happy life. And I would argue that it's not his inability to do that.
Yeah.
But that's,
and that's the
yeah.
And that is the character who did do that is his wife's father, the preacher, right? He bends the knee.
And it's like this piece is, it's complicated, right? It's not telling a simple story, and I think that's what makes this piece so textured, is his father-in-law is this very successful, wealthy black man, and he has power in this town, but that's only because he is willing, right, to bend his knee to play the character that they want him to play and to toe this line. And so it's this, right, it's this very weird liminal space. And there's a character like this in Heavy too, where, right, he's this very powerful black man in the South, but to be this powerful, wealthy black man, he has to bend his knee. So it's a question of, do you give up that sense of self for the power? Like, which is better in the long run for, right, your group of people or just people as a whole? Is it better to bend a knee and build that power through wealth, or is it better to, right, to fight from the beginning, but then maybe not have that wealth, right, to constantly be looking for a job? Yeah.
And like you said, like violence, it doesn't have, violence doesn't necessarily have to be like straight up like violence. Like it could be like the violence of like, like keeping someone from getting employed, of which that is a long scene in the movie where basically like you can't get a job And and he's a proud guy. Like Duff is a proud man. He doesn't want to dress up
Yeah.
in the hotel bellhop
Hotel bellhop.
uniform. And like I think like he doesn't really want to like pick cotton, right? Because it's kind of it probably doesn't feel
Basically
good.
slavery.
Yeah, it doesn't feel good to be like a black man. And it's like in the 1960s, and you're like, yeah, we're picking cotton. It's like for nothing, for very little money. Yeah, stuff like that is just kind of like yeah, that scene is very hard to take in, all those scenes of him getting rejected over and over again, because it kind of is it's because he just is too proud. Like he doesn't want to. And then I mean, it's sort of like climaxes to the scene where when he's working at the gas station, right? And the guy's there because like he tries to help like a guy like get his car or whatever, and he kind of fucks it up or whatever, and then they all like drive over to the gas station and they threaten him, which is a tense scene. You think that something bad is really going to happen,
Crazy.
but they just talk shit. They don't do anything in particular.
No.
By the way, the guy that is driving the car, like the kind of like the bug-eyed guy, the bug-eyed white guy, he's the guy who plays the main character in the other Michael Romero film, like the one I saw in theaters a while ago, called I forgot the name of it. The Plot Against Harry. He plays the main character in that movie. Yeah, it was a great movie, and he's very funny in it. In this movie, he's just kind of evil and insidious and kind of nasty.
Yeah.
But he's good, and
yeah, I think something that you mentioned earlier, which I think is important to talk about, which is the way this film portrays its characters, and sort of the interaction with how these characters would be portrayed now, and the discussion of how this film would exist if it was made, quote unquote, today. And I think one of the things that makes this piece so interesting is that our protagonist isn't necessarily a great human being. I mean, we feel for him and we want for him, but he makes bad decisions, right? He does things.
Yeah.
Like
there's something in you that
yeah,
there is that part of you where it's like, yeah, be proud, don't bend the knee, but yeah, then there are some things, yeah, but even that, honestly, even in those moments, I'm kind of thinking like, like maybe just this once, right? Like even you, the viewer, are kind of thinking like, in my situation, would I do this? Like maybe I would, just to get just once, right? Or just maybe a couple times, like I think that's like a normal response to have to that. And yeah, the thing with this kid, right, is very interesting. Actually, that part of the movie is amazing, where it's like it's him, Duff, and his kid, and also his father, and like kind of like the dynamic between the three is very interesting, in my opinion. All the stuff with his dad, amazing work, great scenes.
But I'm currently working on a piece about sort of my relationship with my father and my relationship with my son, and what it means for me to be both a son and a father, and sort of the complications of it, right, of not having a great relationship with my dad and wanting to have a better relationship with my son, and seeing that on film, right, seeing this very complicated thing where he does not have a good relationship at all, right? His father just kind of fucking fucked off, right? He just disappeared.
Yeah.
And he goes to confront him, and his father basically demeans him, like he does, like his son didn't do good enough, like he wasn't worthy of his fatherhood. And so then that is also reflected in the way that our protagonist, Duff, interacts with his own son, right? He has sort of this, he has a family, and he has sort of the second.
He makes excuses.
Right? He makes excuses.
Yeah, because he's like, it's not my kid. Like he's like, it's not my kid. It's his responsibility technically. I think legally, it seems like, but he's convinced it isn't his child anyway.
Yeah, but that's the complicated thing about, and that's what's so complicated about this piece, is like fatherhood isn't about the familial relationship between a father, right? It is not about the genetics. It is something much more pure and intentional.
Well, yeah. And I think he's just telling himself that just so he can
100%.
Not think about it.
Yeah. I mean, I'm always drawn to that a lot more now than I used to be. Like that wasn't necessarily something I thought about before I had Henry, and now it's something that sort of overwhelms me in a piece. And his relationship, like the first time that he sees his child, right? He's trying. It's funny because he's trying to share his love the same way his father tries to show him love, which is through getting him something, right? Through this, like if he just buys him something, right? I think he brings him like a teddy bear or something the first time that they interact with each
Hmm.
other. And I think it's also interesting that we don't even know he has a son until well into this film. Like we have no idea that he was
Hmm.
married, they had a kid,
He
right?
doesn't say it up front.
It's interesting how much, because like we're having that same experience that his love interest is having, right? She doesn't know that he has a son or he had this life before, and we as the viewer don't know that either. I mean, obviously, right, all characters exist outside the film, so we know like something, right, he existed before the beginning of this film, but there is so much that uh, is left hidden, right, that we purposely aren't told because we are supposed to be sort of put in this place that she's put in, where we're trying, right, she's trying so hard to help and be there for him. And like you said, it's very frustrating because you want to be on his side, you want to support him, but then at the same time you're like,
Hmm. Yeah, he's not a perfect character. That's fine.
yeah. And
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, no, and yeah, that's why the movie's so good. And yeah, he's like obviously affected very much by his father. The fact that he is a drunk, he's a horrific drunk, and he's like treats him like shit. He's like kind of bats him around, sort of. The dad too is too Duff. Yeah, I just love those scenes with his dad just because it's just so like pathetic. Like his dad is so pathetic. Like he like wants to like kind of like talk with his dad and have like some semblance of a connection with him, but he's like a dickhead asshole, like drunk. Like he can't be like really talked to. And and yeah, you're right. Like I think like yeah, he like wants to have a kid, right, with his wife, right? To kind of like do kind of like the starting over thing, right? Like like kind of start over, right? Like in a much better situation or whatever. Um, so yeah, no, I love the Duff character. I think it's an amazing character just because like I just think that you're right that like it is a very like complicated character. He's not perfect. Just kind of like one of those like perfect film characters where you are rooting for him.
Mhm.
But he's not like a perfect character, just like we aren't perfect, right? Like, and yeah, no, and but I also like the Abby Lincoln character as well, which is Josie, his wife.
Mhm.
That character is interesting just because like she's a very like soft-spoken character.
Mhm.
Um, it's an interesting performance. It doesn't really like it's not too explosive. She's very shy and very quiet, which
Yeah.
I feel like is very like they get into arguments, but she never like gets angry. She never yells. She's just like a very shy, quiet person.
Mhm. I think it's interesting the way they portray her in the film because the first time they meet, he's sort of like a laborer and she's an intellectual, right? She's a teacher. She went to college, so she has like there's this juxtaposition between these characters because she grew up, of course, under, right, her father is a preacher, sort of a powerful figure in town. So, relatively speaking, she grew up wealthy, and of course, he certainly did not. And she, I mean, she gives up teaching to be with him, right? She kind of gives up everything to be with him, and partly because he is proud, right? She offers to go back to work in the middle of the film. She's like, I can go back, like I can go teach again. And again, what makes this character so frustrating, but then like you also understand it and you're like, well, I can't also be in this place. Like I don't know how to feel about this, is his hubris is the thing standing in his own way, right? It's she could go back to work, but he is so ashamed at the idea that, of course, this has a lot to do with just the male and female dynamics of the 1960s. And it's right talking about this too in its own complicated way. And it's not necessarily the right way or the best way, but it is at least discussing the fact that they are existing in a moment in time where if his wife works, he right? He has to be ashamed of himself, like he can't provide
Yeah.
for his family, like he's not good enough. And so there is that very interesting dynamic, and her performance is really interesting because she never really pushes back. She always is willing to sort of take the violence, the abuse, the all of it, right? She's just willing to kind of be right, she literally to be hit and to be verbally abused and physically abused.
Yeah, but she doesn't really like get mad at him though for I want to say like she doesn't really like, get mad at him for not being able to find work. She's not really like that concerned with it.
No.
She's like very understanding about it.
Yeah.
Which yeah is like also like kind of like yeah like which is an interesting decision. Again, I feel like there's never a moment where she like demeans him to like find a job or do this. It doesn't seem to be something that it's terribly like important to her for him to do. She's like very understanding, and so that means like all that shame and stuff of him not being able to provide his family is sort of self-inflicted.
Mm-hmm.
Which is interesting as well.
Yeah, there's this very interesting sort of dynamic where, of course, there's the violence and harm that's external, that's happening to him, but then there's also this very, which I think you're right. I think that by her not sort of responding, reacting, by pushing it back on him, the harm becomes self-harm, becomes internal. And so his own sense, right, there's that great moment, which we were talking a little bit about earlier, where he's sitting in the truck and they're driving past the cotton fields, right? And you see people picking cotton, and just like, of course, the connections to slavery are so, right, they're right there, right? It's right in front of you. It's very obvious. And it's what's so haunting about the scene is this is something that was genuinely happy in the 1960s, right? They were paying people. I mean, even after, of course, the Civil War and, slaves are free, right? Serfdom still basically exists for several decades afterwards, where, the people who were slaves become something that technically isn't a slave, but you might as well, right? You're basically just a wage slave. You basically exist in the same universe. And here we are, right? 100 years later, in the 1960s, and it's still the same thing, right? These people are still more or less slaves, right? They're still working for so little. They're still picking cotton. They still have these terrible hours, and they still hold no power, that they're in the exact same place that they were. And you don't want him to be in that place. And so you have these at least I have these very conflicted feelings about it, because on the one hand, I'm like, if you just bend your knee, right? And you said this too, if you just bend your knee this one time, maybe it'll just work out. Maybe things will be okay. If you just let go. But then it also like, well, does that come from a place of privilege, of power, of not living of the 1960s, of not looking like him, of not existing in the world that he existed, right? Like, if I'm put in that position, I don't know how I'm gonna react to it, because there's so much separation from it. And so there's this sense of wanting to I mean, I'm definitely rooting for him the whole time, and I feel for him, and I'm frustrated by him, because he's making decisions that like aren't going to be the best for him on a lot of different levels. But one thing you can say about him is he's always staying true to himself, which is, it's not an easy thing to do, right? It's not easy to be willing to give up these jobs. And I mean, even at that moment, right, where I'm thinking at the sawmill, where they're basically like, you have to leave because you won't get in line, right? His refusal to apologize for something that he didn't do, but then also like the lengths that he's willing to go up to that point, right? Because it's not like he's not willing to do anything. It's not as if he just has this line and he's never willing to cross it.
He just doesn't want to do anything humiliating.
Yeah, like it's really not that much to ask of a human being, but apparently it is too much to ask of, right, of him. It is too much to ask of. I mean, apparently, because they right they're always trying to put him in his place, right? They say, oh, you know, gotta put you back in your place, and even like the verbiage, right? The use of calling him a boy, right? To and
Right.
this is something that they talk a lot about
So
in Black
30.
Boys, is this idea to kind of unmasculate men. And I can't remember if this is a conversation in this film or if it's just from the readings, but I've been doing a lot recently. I swear there's a conversation in here, and you'll have to remind me if there's or not, about what the difference between being a black man and a black woman, and the fact that as a black, yeah, I think it is in this film, right? Because he talks to her about the fact that they're not afraid of her, right? The difference between being a black man and a black woman is
Yeah.
is that obviously the racism still exists, and of course there's the whole thing of you know of being a woman, right? That in and of itself has its thing, but the way in the South white people treated black women versus black men was fundamentally different, because whenever they were around a black man there was always that sense of fear, and so that affected how they interacted with them, versus a black woman where there wasn't that. I mean, there's still all the terrible things that are happening, but it's not coming from a place of fear. So perhaps she is able to interact differently, and so like the way she interacts with the world is fundamentally different. For, I mean, you know, class is a big discussion here, right? I love those discussions where they're at the father-in-law's house, between the father-in-law
Yeah, they talk about it.
and Duff, right? They have that conversation of like being willing to bend, right? Being willing to bend a little so you can build that sense of power, so you can build that wealth.
Yeah.
And that, you know, it's just like, it's a really interesting interaction. And what's so fascinating about the way the story is told is it's not necessarily putting any of them in a better or worse light, right? It's not saying like this is the right way of doing it. It's not preaching that, you know, Duff is in the right and this guy is completely in the wrong. It's just, it's sharing these different ways of trying to get power and failing to achieve that power, or perhaps in another sense maybe finding success in their own ways of trying to find that power. And so like having that interaction inside that house, right, in a place of wealth, right, that kind of middle class, like we have our own home, right, we have a place where we can do things, we can control things, we have a say over so much. And yet, you know, from Duff's view, he's like, how are you any better than, right, the house slave, right? How are you any different than, you know, how is what you're doing any different than anyone else who's bending their knee? Like, we have to, you know, at the end of the day, if you're bending your knee, no matter what, right, no matter what you're getting in return, it's not worth it, right? There is no amount, there is nothing that Duff can get. And I think that that's something to admire about Duff, is there's nothing that he's willing to do to bend that knee, right? There's no amount of money, there's no thing that you can give him that will just be like, you know what, fine, all right, I'll just give up, I'll just give in. He's constantly, for better or worse, and not always a lot of times for worse, right, he's always willing to take the fight, right, to always push back. And I think that gas station scene is so interesting, because up to that point he has been pushing back, and you can see that each time he pushes back a little less, right? He's kind of getting beaten down throughout the film, and he's starting, right, his knees are starting to bend, he's starting to give in a little bit more. And what makes that gas station scene so incredibly frustrating is he pretty much bends his knee, right? He basically, he does everything in his power to not fight back, right? Something that he has been failing to do throughout the film, right? Because he's constantly pushing back. He's constantly trying to, you know, show his worth. And in this moment, right, they're just pushing him, and he is trying so hard not to do it. And it doesn't break out into violence, right? There is no punch in the face from either direction, right? There is no explosive moment. You know, they just kind of dry up off. And that interaction he has with the gas station owner is interesting too, because, and then you have to ask yourself that question, you know, who's in the wrong here? I mean, obviously, like, the men in the car are obviously in the wrong, but the gas station worker is coming from this place. He's like, if I don't let you go, they'll blow up my building, right? They will the threat extends beyond him. But then like the question is, well, if you're willing to do this, right, like that violence kind of creates the cycle of violence, and so what are you not willing to do? And so to me, like the very first thing that I thought of when we sat down to talk about this conversation was the gas station, the scene. Like that's the scene that sticks in my head because it is all of these contradictory things coming to the single moment where you would think, again, talking about what we've been talking about so much, is like talking about what this film would look like if it was made today. Another filmmaker would have made this moment a fight scene, right? What either Duff gets beaten up or Duff beats them up, right? One of those two things would probably happen, right? You would need that. You need that catharsis, and I can see the notes already from like other writers or filmmakers, if they watched this film that was came modern day, of saying those notes like, no, you can't just leave, right? You can't just let it go. But that's what makes the moment so challenging and so difficult and honest. I think it is a really great way to describe this moment. Is you don't get right. You don't get that feeling of being free, of it just being over and being okay. Like it's going to exist forever, and that the tension's never going to break. That tension's always going to be there no matter what you do.
Yeah, I mean, I think the catharsis is in the ending of the movie when he embraces again Josie after being gone.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why, but like I think like the ending is like very Bressonian. It reminds me of Bresson a lot. Because it's like Josie, I wouldn't say, like, obviously actors, they act very emotionally, like compared to like actors in a Bresson film.
Mm-hmm.
But the moment where they embrace, there is something kind of very Bressonian about it. It does feel like an incredibly climactic moment, and she like cries too, which I think she cries earlier in the movie, but in this moment in particular, she seems particularly emotional.
Mm-hmm.
That's the cathartic moment, right? Like it's not a fight scene or like this like explosive like act of violence or something like that. Like it's that moment where he embraces her, because before then he's like basically all of this has basically come to a head where he's basically just like, I'm out of here, like
Mm-hmm.
this sucks. And he goes to see his dad for like the second time, and his dad is in like terrible shape. Like he's awful, and like he has a girlfriend Lee, and they're gonna like drive him to the hospital, and he dies.
Yeah.
and they're like, oh great. And then like as they're like they're talking to like the funeral director or whatever about his burial, and they're like, they don't know how old he is, they don't know his birthday, he has like no possessions,
Mm-hmm.
basically, and that's it. Like he dies. Like he was like, there was nothing. He was just like a man of no note, right? I mean, he had a son, but he refused to like connect with him in any way. And like Lee asked him like, okay, what are you gonna do now? Like after his father is like buried, and he's like, I don't remember what his response was, but we know what he does is that he like goes back home to see Joe. He picks up his son,
Mm-hmm.
right, which is a great moment. And it's like the car is like fucked up, like it's got like holes in the windows and stuff like that. He takes him home, and he like embraces like Josie. That moment, and I love the ending so much. It ended more positively than I thought it was going to. Actually, I thought it was going to end really terribly, in which someone would die horribly in a race-related,
Act of violence.
Act of violence. Yeah. But instead, it's all about him. It's all about Duff, about his realization of taking responsibility and not wanting to be like his father, right? Right.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't want to be the father to his son that his father was to him, right? Because then you'll just basically die, and like a complete, like you'll basically just like drink yourself so much, you drink so much you'll just die. Like that's it. Like you just like your body shuts down because you have no meaning in life, that you don't really care about anyone, like no one cares about you, and it's like an extremely sad, depressing existence, and you just sort of just like fade away,
Mm-hmm.
And of course Duff sees that, and he's like, fuck that, like I don't want that. and so he gets a son, and he returns back to his like home. despite the fact that he knows it will be challenging.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's so intriguing and thoughtful that, of course, there's the parallel between him and his father and him and his son, and that moment where he picks up his son and he makes this decision to go back to start this family because he doesn't want to be like his father. And sort of the embracing of all powerful love of family over everything else, that he's willing to do whatever it takes if it means that he can be with his family, if it means that he can be with his son and his wife and share that love. And I think that is very powerful. And I'm left with the film, maybe there is a sense of catharsis, and maybe and it definitely goes into darker, but I'm definitely left with sort of this bittersweetness because he still has to exist in the world, right?
No, it's still like a challenging
You know?
existence. Like it's still going to be like a horrific, like challenging existence. Like nothing has changed. The only thing that has changed is himself,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
But- yeah,
It's an interesting ending because we're not, to me, like, I'm not given that finality of it, right? It feels like there's still more to happen, and we just, as the viewer, don't get that, right? We don't,
do they make it? What happened? You know, it's
right? Like what the
but-
fuck
but
happens? Like,
yeah, I just think that like there's also something about the movie too that is interesting, just because like the movie when it came out, and also just kind of like when the way that the movie kind of is, it really does feel like this movie that's on the cusp of
Mhm.
like kind of like this sort of like civil rights movement kind of thing, you know. It kind of like feels like a movie that's on the cusp of it, you know. And obviously it is a situation, especially when it came out, obviously, but this movie really, I think, really feels that way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it definitely does. Like, you can feel sort of the bomb, right, that kind of lies underneath, and it never goes off in the film, but you can feel it there the whole time, and you're just waiting and waiting and waiting, and the tension grows harder and harder, and you just don't, right, you know that like this film can't exist on its own. And I think the context, you know, I often don't think context is important for a film. I like to come into most of my films blind, as blind as I can be. Of course, sometimes I'm a lot more blind. Other times, sometimes I know a lot about a film going in. Sometimes I know nearly nothing. Of course, I'm aware a lot of the context of this film before I watched it. So, but I think that's valuable. I think that's important with this piece. Not that you can't, you know, if you're not an American, you probably don't have the exact same context as, you know, we do in America. Like, we understand race in a very specific way. We see race in a very specific way that is very American, particularly in the 1960s. So I think an American viewing this film will have a very different experience because they have a certain context that you might not have if, you know, you're from another country, you live in another country. But the film is still just as powerful, right? I mean, just the story of him just trying to live his life, just trying to be a human being, is so frustrating, and it hurts, and it's hard, and, you know, but you do feel like that true sense of love at the end when he embraces her, and you're like, you know, maybe it will work out, but maybe it also won't. We don't know, and we don't get to know that, right? We have to kind of live with the non-finality of it, right? Of not knowing, like, you know, is he gonna be a better father than his father? I mean, probably. He seems to have already be achieving that, but, you know, is he gonna be able to find work in this town that he's kind of burned all of his bridges? Are they gonna have to move somewhere else? You know what, you're not given that luxury of knowing. You're kind of just left wondering.
Yeah, I don't know. I love that ending.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, like it's a good ending, just because it's like, yeah, there's just something about it that's very, I don't know. It's a beautiful ending, and again, like you have great, again, like it's a beautiful shot film. It's a wonderfully written film. You know, I think all the way through, it's like really good. It's just, yeah, like a very, very great American film, right? About a very American, about many different American subjects, right? Race, the dynamics between men and women, wealth, work, labor, these things. I think all these subjects come together in like a really like well done film that's just like at 90 minutes.
Yeah. And I think that sums up the movie a lot better than I can sum up the movie. So I'll just give a few more final words, although I think
Yeah,
already give quite
I
a
pretty much did.
good
Yeah.
summation of the film and what's so wonderful about it. And I think for me, what makes this film so beautiful is that our protagonist Duff is so human. And I think that's a very hard thing to do, and I think that's a very hard thing to do well. And I think it's even more hard to do in a piece that's already trying to say a lot of other things, that already has a lot to say about race and power and sex and labor. And in a film that's doing all those things, to still make a protagonist that is very human and has flaws and does things that we would prefer that he didn't do, and does these frustrating things and isn't a perfect person, is a very bold and, dare I say, brave stance to take, because it would be so easy to make Duff this sort of perfect fallen hero that everyone absolutely loves, but you just can't get a handle on things. And I think there are a lot of films that do that, and a lot of films that, because they're trying to say so many other things, that they're just not as concerned about this. But this, first and foremost, is a story about character, right? This is a story built on character, and everything is built around that. And to make someone who is so flawed, who makes bad decisions, who does bad things, who does things that frustrate you, really bring the piece whole and make the piece everything that it can be. So I'm going to give this, I don't know, I'm kind of on the fence here. I think I'm going to go with an 8, but a very strong 8 out of 10.
I'm gonna go with an 8 as well. Yeah, just a very good, great kind of like, beautiful shot film, great movie. Again, so many different like great, like performances, and just, I don't know. It's just like a very clear cut, entertaining. It's entertaining, like it has like a good amount of like tension. It has a good amount of drama, but it also feels very kind of like ahead of its time as well. So yeah, I'm gonna give it 8 out of 10.
All right, y'all. Thank you all for listening so much. You can find this podcast wherever you hear podcasts. You also hear us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at With Nothing to Say. And thank you all for listening.
Thanks again.